Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Boys in Motion podcast. We're your hosts, Brian, Andrew, and Tyler, here to break down tips and strategies that you need to excel in endurance sports. This is episode 12, and today we're telling you why Zone 2 is the best way to get fit.
Could not have said it better myself, and Zone 2 is absolutely my favorite zone. And in this episode, we'll be walking you through what Zone 2 is, the benefits of this popular heart rate zone, and we'll also be breaking down how to incorporate this into your weekly training plan for a seamless integration into your training.
Agree with you, Andrew. Zone 2 has to be my favorite. And you know what they say, if you ain't chatting when you're training, you're not in Zone 2. You're in those other pesky zones that you don't want to be in. Let's get to the juice of the meat here. What's going on?
Yeah, for sure. So, just a recap of training zones, and we have another great podcast on this which touched on all of the heart rate training zones. So, I encourage you to watch or listen to that as well. But diving into zone 2, it is one of the 5 training zones that we previously defined. And training heart rate zones are a concept that are defined as specific percentages of your maximum heart rate. So they really correspond to different levels of intensity. They range from very light, which is that zone 1, all the way to a maximal effort, which is zone 5, or what Tyler really likes, that zone 5 plus, when he's going full lizard at the end of a race. But really, zone 2 is at the bottom of that pyramid. It's really the base of your fitness, and it's very, very important when it comes to really the building the meat and potatoes of your training schedule.
And you know me, I love my meat and potatoes. That like you're saying, it's that aerobic base. You do that 80-20 rule, 80% aerobic, that 20% higher end stuff, and even some of the greats, they do the 90-10. So it's really important, I think, for everybody to just get into that low and slow, keep the engine burning.
Yeah, and for those that didn't tune in to that heart rate training episode, just to give a definition on what Zone 2 is, Zone 2 is that 60 to 70% of maximum heart rate. And if you're looking to try to calculate that or figure that out, do check out that heart rate training episode for more details. So it's really that low intensity effort where, like Tyler said, you got to be chatting for this zone. So you have to be able to maintain a conversation or maybe just sing a tune to yourself if you're all alone. And it's often described as that steady state effort because it really is that sustainable effort over a long period of time. It really is that zone that you could be doing almost forever. It's just you're very comfortable. And as long as your legs can keep moving and there's not crazy fatigue in your leg, as far as your aerobic engine, it can just keep on chugging away.
For sure. And I find myself sometimes a good song might come on and I might whistle along. And if I'm whistling, then I know I'm in zone 2 because it would be impossible to do that in zone 3. More scientifically, because zone 2 is really something that does have pretty strict constraints on when it comes to definitions inside of a lab environment. And even some of the pros are now using blood lactate concentrations to actually check, make sure they're in zone 2, and they're doing that through ear picks and then analyzing their blood on the spot while they're working out. And so scientifically, it's defined as the highest metabolic output you can sustain while keeping your blood lactate concentration below 2 millimole per liter. So, this is where your body is primarily able to use fat as a fuel source. So, it's ideal for long durations of effort. That being said, when you're in those long durations of effort, you still want to be fueling using carbohydrates so that your body has more and more energy to continue, chugging along with.
That's that limit right there, the 2 millimoles. Nobody knows except for the pros how to calculate that, but that's that fine line where you either go into no man's land or you keep it low and steady and you could keep going. But like you said, you got to keep your carb stores up, and you could go on forever basically, unless your legs give out. But that's for a different episode. Let's start going into some of the benefits. My favorite benefits of zone 2 training. Again, sound like a broken record on here, the aerobic base development. It's crucial for that development of that base, keeps you going for those sustained long periods of time. And if you get into those few hour races or even sessions, that's where your zone 2 will be building, and where you'll thrive is those longer sessions throughout those training weeks and even months of ongoing stress on the body. The zone 2 endurance really gets you to that next level.
And as you're building that aerobic base and just stacking those blocks, as Brian had mentioned, when you're in this zone 2, you are primarily using your fat as the fuel source. So this has the benefit of enhancing your fat metabolism. So it helps your body improve the ability to oxidate fat as a fuel source. And this is important because fat is nearly an unlimited energy reserve, especially during those super long, prolonged exercises. So think ultra endurance or your long runs, and be able to last that whole time and not burn out. So over time, this adaptation will help in sparing your glycogen stores and delay fatigue during endurance events.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you do notice as you continue to train and you build some blocks of zone 2 focused training, it ends up being so much easier when you're exercising in zone 2 that you like crave to be in that zone, because it's easy, it's comfortable, but you're still doing so much benefit to your fitness. And another part of that benefit is the fact that you're reducing your risk of injury and overtraining. The fact of the matter is, none of us, no matter how much we would love to always be doing tough workouts to push boundaries, our bodies won't allow us to do that. You can't go out and do 12 threshold and VO2 max interval workouts a week. Your body will break down. So zone 2 is fantastic because it's less taxing on the body as well. So it allows for more frequent training with a lower risk of injury. It also minimizes the wear and tear associated with those high intensity efforts. So it helps you build that consistency, longevity in training. It builds that base of the pyramid that we were talking about, that zone 2 width of your pyramid. And then when you've got that width of base, you can build that really high stack with that intense VO2 max training as well.
And I find it crazy how fast it compounds, and it just week over week even it builds and builds for that low intensity but very well defined program for when you're actually trying to build up to something like a main race. So it's easy to get your mileage in, like Brian mentioned, keep your risk levels down, and you never want to overtrain. Even though you're on that brink of overtraining, you're just trying to stay under that max level before getting either sick or injured. So you're trying to stay out of that.
Yeah, and I always love when somebody new to the sport starts training and they have like those first few weeks where you're kind of stumbling around workout to workout, and like your body's sore because it might be a new movement and you don't quite have the base where like those workouts are really, really tough. But then come like that fourth, that sixth week, you really get in that habit of like having done enough focused zone 2 training where the zone 2 sessions are just very enjoyable, which is, I think, the biggest hurdle to overcome, is going from the beginner stages of just like trying to start exercising, building that consistency muscle, to when you've done just enough zone 2 that it becomes something that is a sustainable zone where you start actually being able to call it a steady state. I think that's a very, very happy place that athletes get to reach after that first month and a half of training.
Yeah, for sure. And then chatting about zone 2 versus that high intensity training that as you get more into running, more into the sport, you start to incorporate into your routine. Let's chat about why that zone 2 is so important as you begin, but even then as you progress in the sport. why it's such a crucial part in all of our training. The first is really the energy systems and lactate buildup. And what I mean by this is that zone 2 will primarily utilize that aerobic energy system. So that is our engine when it comes to running. And that is really what all of us are trying to build. All of us, as we enter into a training block, we do an aerobic base building block. And that is really just a lot of easy running so that our body can get used to and adapt to mileage before we start taking on more of that high intensity training. So you really want your body to efficiently use oxygen to produce energy with minimal lactate production before you start incorporating that high intensity training. Where in contrast, the high intensity training will rely on that anaerobic process. So creeping into that zone 5, which will lead to quicker lactate accumulation, which causes muscle fatigue. So there is difference in the energy systems used between the two types of running.
Yeah, I absolutely adore how you broke that down, looking at the phrase, and I want to say it again. It's your ability to use oxygen to produce energy with the minimal lactate production. And when we were talking earlier about that 2 millimole per liter of lactate concentration, I think it's really easy to break down if we're talking about a bike, because a bike on a trainer is something that is super steady. There's very few external factors that might affect how much energy you can produce and stay at that zone 2. So for example, a rider with an FTP of, let's say, and we might get a little bit technical. So if a rider has an FTP of about 280 to 300 watts, they might have a zone 2 of about 200 watts, which means they could push and produce 200 watts of power on their stationary bike while maintaining a lactate level of 2 millimole per liter. So that's exactly how you would define that. Perhaps for running, you could say, well, if you're an efficient runner and your zone 2 is at 6 minutes per kilometer given the temperature of 20 degrees Celsius and you're on a flat terrain, that's another way you might look at it. Or of course a treadmill. Maybe you can run a 6-minute kilometer and stay at that lactate concentration level. But again, heart rate, and we'll dig into this, how you incorporate this into your training is also another really good way to look to that. And I'm going to jump to that. So how you can incorporate zone 2 training into your routine. The first is monitoring your heart rate. It's the most accessible manner to do that, rather than pricking and looking at your blood analysis while you're exercising. That's not kind of achievable for most people, especially in our positions when you don't have sports scientists supporting you. So to ensure you're in zone 2, using a heart rate monitor to track your intensity and calculating that target heart rate range at 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, which can be roughly estimated as 220 minus your age. Or you can again jump to that heart rate training zones episode to get a lot more detail on how you'd find your max heart rate. But consistently staying within this range is key to reaping the benefits of zone 2.
Yeah, and I think overall speaking, like getting those zone 2 benefits is just complementary to all your other workouts. Like you do your zone 2, you build that base, and then you get those higher limits as well. So altogether, they just create a good balanced effort. You're trained well, you could consistently keep up your volume, your mileage, no matter what sport you're doing. This could be across any sport. And then you could do those higher limits and also stay within those lower limits, which is your zone 2, and stay healthy, not injured, and really at the end of the day, once you keep consistent, you stay fresh too, with less time to recover from those harder sessions. Your recovery runs become your zone 2 runs.
And another thing on those zone 2 runs doesn't always necessarily, I mean, we're training for endurance sports, cycling, swimming, triathlon, running, but, and this is one thing that I love about the Fitzinger plans, is on the Monday during your main block, it's a rest / cross training day. And this is a great way to incorporate one, zone 2 training, which is great, which will improve your endurance, but also add variety in your training plan is to add other cross training activities. For me, for example, like swimming, rowing, brisk walk, hiking, as I mean, hypothetically, as low impact alternatives to keep variety, keep you engaged. So it's has kind of that double benefit. It gives you variety, makes you, add some change to the monotony of a training plan. I know for me, those big training weeks, it can get very tedious when I'm going up and kind of switching into another sport can be fun. But then you can, work some different muscles and then still get that zone 2 work. So it is still productive.
Did I hear the S word come out of your mouth, Andy? That is wild.
Just information for the listeners, not for me.
Yeah, and you want to talk about variety. I've got something interesting coming up in my fall training plan schedule. On Monday nights, my partner and I will be doing dance classes because we're gearing up for an event where we may need to dance at it. And so we have salsa and East Coast swing dance, and we'll see if I can hit that zone 2. Maybe I'll have to wear my heart rate monitor and yeah, see if my heart rate can get up into that zone 2. Then I can cross that off the list as some good cross training.
Oh, you better put that on Strava, let me tell you. You got to put the dance mode on that Apple Watch.
Yeah, it is something you can track. It is a trackable workout, so we'll see.
Just another thing I wanted to mention before getting too much off topic here is, me and my Excel sheets. I love scheduling my weeks, scheduling my plan months in advance. Following it, on the other hand, different story. That's for another episode. But structuring your week is also very important in those zone 2 efforts, whichever sport you're doing. Within those high intensity workouts is very important as well. So you really want to apply your zone 2 throughout the week, not just front load it and then you go crazy at the end of the week. You kind of really want to keep that zone 2 steady throughout your whole week, and that way, it obviously fills up your week, but it also helps you build endurance within your week without getting overtrained. And successful week comes with most days hitting your planned, your planned days, your prescribed days, and also hitting those much needed zone 2 big boy days.
You're right. It is really important to plan ahead with zone 2, especially in a large block where you're doing a lot of mileage, because zone 2 workouts are so long. For some of them, especially, you'll generally have a long ride, a long run on the weekend, and that can take hours of time. So making sure that it's in your schedule, you're building your social calendar around that is something that's important, because it's easy to, take a 2-hour run and say, oh, I'll go out for 5K. Well, if you do that every week, you're going to miss out on a ton of mileage, and then you're going to lose performance when the big day comes. In addition to structuring your weekly plan, there's also a great network of tools and applications that you can use nowadays. So apps like Training Peaks, Strava, Garmin, or Wahoo allow you to track your zone 2 efforts. Apple Watch, same thing. So you can analyze your progress over time. This will help you adjust your training load, ensuring that you stay within the appropriate intensity range while you're exercising. And also, you have the data so you can see how much zone 2 you're training in, so you can get that balance. I know you threw out the 80-20. For those of you that don't know, it's generally a good rule of thumb when you're looking at any plan to ensure that 80% of the total volume is in that zone 2, and then 20% of your mileage or your effort is at kind of higher intensity zones, zone 4, zone 5. And some of the pros, you did mention this, Tadej Pogacar, he is doing 10% high intensity and 90% zone 2. So it really is important that you focus on a ton of volume at that zone 2. But I do have a question. What are some misconceptions that people might have about zone 2, and how do we kind of overcome those?
Yeah, I can kick this one off. And this is one that I see a lot from people that are just getting into endurance sports, whether it be cycling, running. I think those are primarily where I see it, but is overcoming impatience when doing zone 2 training. Sticking with zone low intensity workouts can feel unproductive, can feel kind of boring. People think it feels like too easy, especially when you're just getting started and you haven't built that aerobic engine. So your zone two really is not very quick or that high intensity, but you should really trust the process and recognize that there are tons of benefits to zone two training, but it can take time. It can take weeks, it can take months, depending where you're starting and where your base is at currently. But just blasting out of the gate every time and trying to make every endurance session a hard session where at the end you're completely done, you're either going to get injured or burnt out. So just trust the process and go slow to get fast.
That's those magic words right there. Go slow to go fast. That was my main problem first starting, was just that impatience. I couldn't wrap my head around I have to go slow. I always wanted to go quick and burst out the gates, but you just have to trust the process, go slow, get on those slow runs. No matter how slow it is, you might think it is, doesn't matter. Just go easy peasy. And on that note, slower doesn't mean easier. That's another misconception, is just because you're doing those zone 2 runs doesn't mean it's easier. It just means you're more calculated, thought out. That discipline is actually what's more, you could say, impressive with the whole thing, is you're doing it for a purpose. You're staying within this range, whether it's RPE or heart rate we've been talking about. Just focuses yourself on those long-term goals and getting those gains in, baby. You got to get those gains in.
Yeah, another thing that I have heard, and we don't have it in our show notes, but I've heard the quote, zone 2 training will make you slow. And the reason they were saying this was because they think, well, if you spend so much time in zone 2 going slow, then it's going to reduce your ability to perform at high intensities. And for sure, like when we're talking about like the 10-second all out max effort, it might reduce that because your body will adjust to the zone 2 exercise that you're doing, which is building more slow twitch muscle fiber in your muscles, less fast twitch, which are more for that 10-second instant power. But really, when we're talking about endurance sports, zone 2 training will enhance your ability to sustain higher intensities by building that robust aerobic base, which supports speed and power development as well. So I think that's a key misconception that a lot of people don't understand, is just because you're training slow doesn't mean you're training to go slow.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up, just to give one more, speaking on the training at slower paces and being feeling a bit impatient, this is something that at the beginning will you'll have to have that mental shift of that you're going to have progress for your hard workouts. One of the big reasons for zone 2 is you want to get that mileage, you want to get that base, and then with getting the mileage, you're able to then go and smash your workouts harder. So you're able to scale it back for a lot of your training to get the aerobic base. But then when you go to hit those workouts, you're a lot more fresh and you can actually go hard enough to actually see progress for whichever distance you're going for. So you really need to try to stay committed to zone 2 so that you can really perform on those hard days. If you're being a little impatient and just allowing your mind to say, oh, I feel good today, I'm going to push a little bit more, you're probably going to struggle tomorrow when you have that big interval session. So really staying strong mentally and staying in zone 2 is the right play. And I know sometimes even I struggle with this for sure, where some days I'm just bopping along, I have a new pair of shoes on, the foam feels real nice, and I just, I want to zoom, but you do have to try to pull yourself back on those days that are slotted for zone 2 for sure.
Yeah, and it's tough for everybody. It's tough for me as well. It's something I struggle with, but I tell myself more intensity doesn't mean more progress. Like I shouldn't be leaving every run feeling exhausted, because if I'm inducing fatigue, it means that I'm going to be ineffective for upcoming work that is scheduled, that is defined with a purpose. So zone 2 stays zone 2. It's something to continue to reinforce and it's something that, yeah, I think no matter your level in the sport, it's easy to push yourself a little bit too hard.
You got to keep it smart. I always find myself that too. Sometimes group runs, you always find yourself creeping up into those faster paces, just still chatting, but your heart rate's just creeping up, getting through the roof, and maybe you're at a harder effort than some of us over here. But yeah, it does make a difference for the next days or your upcoming even your upcoming weeks. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, fantastic. So, shifting gears a little bit, Tyler, you had the great idea to do an athlete comparison between what an elite athlete like Eliud Kipchoge's Zone 2 might be, or, for example, what Tadej Pogacar's Zone 2 wattage might be, versus the regular Joe. So, Andrew, maybe you can run us through Eliud Kipchoge, and then myself and Ty, we can take the cyclists.
Sounds good. Yeah. So Eliud Kipchoge. So we're basing this off of his official marathon time, which is 2:01:09 at the Berlin Marathon, and then we're just gonna put that into VDOT and see what kind of his training paces are based on that. There are some things online of what it might be based on different reports, but I think this is just an easy way to kind of look at those zones based on where he probably is for a lot of his work. So based on that, that's a marathon pace of 4:34 per mile or 2:50 per kilometer. So just to put that into context for that 2:01 marathon, and I know for a while there was a lot of people were doing it, the marathon pace treadmill videos, which I loved watching on basically like how long could you hang on this treadmill, which was pretty entertaining. But now if we roll it back, so that's his marathon pace, that's what he's trying to race for. But now if we put that into VDOT, VDOT tells us that Eliud Kipchoge's easy pace would be between 5:18 to 5:51 per mile, and that is a 3:18 to 3:38 kilometer. I don't
That
know.
is
What do you guys think about that?
that is blistering fast. I can't even begin to understand it. I went out recently and tried my fastest kilometer, and I could only in 1 kilometer could I hold Eliud Kipchoge's Zone 2. And even so, it's not at the fastest part of his Zone 2 kind of window. It would be at the slower part of his Zone 2 window. So it is so impressive and otherworldly.
That's crazy. I can't even imagine. Like that, I really want to do that treadmill video. You know how they, like you had mentioned, Andrew, at those race expos and stuff like that. I really want to see how long I could last on that treadmill before I face plant. Like that's crazy. And he does it with such grace and just like nonchalantly, like he's out on a Sunday ride. Like it's crazy how fast he is.
Yeah, I think that's the craziest thing is seeing footage of them running, especially at that marathon pace, just how easy and flowy their stride is. I mean, we've seen in the last year or so, we've seen Elliott struggle a little bit more in a couple marathons, especially when it gets a little hilly. But when these elite runners are on, it just looks so easy. It's obviously not. It's hard. They're just going a lot faster, but they make it look easy.
Just like a well-oiled machine. They're just humming. It's so nice to see.
Yeah, and just to put into context, that easy pace, my 5 kilometer pace is like right in the middle of that easy pace, which is pretty crazy. And my mile PR is 10 seconds slower than his marathon pace, which yeah, he's a speedy boy.
And like even for me and Brian, you could probably say close to the same. Like, well, even Pete with the chirps. What was it? My all out 5K is Andrew's marathon pace. So like it's just like that times 10 again. Like just with what is it? Berlin, trying to qualify for Berlin, up to those elite, just like top of the world athletes. It's just crazy.
That's it. And again, like it's not it's tough to even be relative about those things because it takes so much more training when you're at the pinnacle of the sport to increase a little bit more. So every second that the pros are knocking down in the marathon time or the 1500-meter time takes so much more training than it takes any of us to take 1 minute off of our times, right? So it's crazy just to put that in perspective. Now, moving over to the cycling side, somebody like Tadej Pogačar, and the way we're going to calculate this is looking at their FTP, so functional threshold power, which is which is defined as how much power you could push on the bike for 1 hour, and then doing essentially 65% of that. So somebody like Tadej Pogačar, he recently had an estimated FTP somewhere around 6 to 6.5 watts per kilo as their FTP, whereas myself, I am somewhere from the mid to high 3 watts per kilo, so 3.8 approximately watts per kilo. Tyler, I'm not sure approximately where your FTP would stand.
I'm probably around the 3, I think, because I'm just thinking the zone 2, I could push probably 2 watts per kilo, but you get to that FTP, what you could hold for an hour. And 3, I don't know if I could get into the higher levels of 3 yet, but yeah, it's just crazy the amount, the high level they're at. And also, a lot of it is at altitude, too.
Well, that's exactly it. So myself, my zone 2 power would be roughly around 2.5 watts per kilo is where I would be trying to push. And that's roughly around 210 watts. Somebody like Tadej Pogačar being at this, let's say 6.5 watts per kilo, he would end up being much higher from a watts per kilo, but he's also lighter. So Tadej Pogačar might have a zone 2 power of about 4.2 watts per kilo, which is enormous. So Tadej Pogačar riding zone 2 is something that you and I could not even keep up with, which is incredibly fast, and it just shows you how out of reach the pros are, whether you're cycling, whether you're running. And it even makes it more amazing when you talk about some of the elite triathletes who are so incredible at both of those disciplines.
Yeah, that's what I find bonkers too. It's like some of the best in the triathlete game are like, sub 3 marathons, even 2.5 hour marathons after a crazy bike ride, just destroying the quads for they could do 180K in 3-4 hours. Like it's crazy. I heard some of Sanders' numbers for his most recent Ironman, and it was like he said he was pushing, what was it, like 350 for the first few hours, and then he's like, oh, I kind of blew up, so I was only pushing 250 watts. It's like, what do you mean? And then he still runs like a 2.5 hour marathon, and it's just like these guys just take it to the next level. It's amazing to see.
All right, I think it's time to move on to everyone's favorite segment of the week, and that is the hot take of the week.
Oh, I got something right on target. Zone 2 being the big topic. The fact of the matter is, you you and whoever's listening, you're probably training too hard too often. And you're a sucker getting sucked in to the high intensity, trying to prove yourself, trying to prove all your followers on Strava just how fit you are, and you end up screwing yourself, screwing your training plan a little bit, overtraining, perhaps risking injury, all for the love of the game and for the love of the data. I know it's nice to tie on a nice pair of shoes or see a hill and want to tackle it while you're supposed to be in a zone 2 workout, but the no pain, no gain attitude is not in for 2024. It's not in for 2025. So I think the argument here is if you're overemphasizing your high intensity sessions and neglecting the foundational benefits of zone 2 training, you're burning yourself up. You're a sucker.
I think you just put my name all over this hot take. I don't know. I don't know what to say here. I think my zone 2s are nice and easy, slow and steady, burning that engine.
I have a question for you, Tyler. What are your recovery, let's runs, because I can compare that. What are your recovery runs at normally?
What are recovery
Pace.
runs?
Okay. Checks out.
guys never heard of them. I do this myself sometimes, and I'm getting much, much better. Is when I go out for that zone 2 run, I try to flip away from the screen where I see the pace, and I might just look at heart rate for the whole run. And I feel like some of those runs are the best runs that I go out and have because my mind's on something different than the pace.
Very true. It's hard to do, but I don't know. In this prep, in like you're getting fired up, you just can't keep it low enough. You just gotta stay at the like that brim. Like I stay at the. I'm lucky, I guess. I could keep my heart rate pretty low, but it's definitely not a recovery run. I keep it at that low, kind of that higher limit of zone 2. So Andrew, I think you got a point here. I don't know what a recovery run is.
I think what you need to remember is that the your heart rate being low is relative to your max heart rate, right? So even though it's lower than, let's say, my heart rate when I'm doing a recovery run, you have to know your max heart rate, or else a 140, a 135 is kind of irrelevant if you don't know that
True.
max.
I never thought of
So
that. That is true. I haven't ripped a max heart rate in a while.
I think that's the takeaway here. I think we gotta actually find out all of our max heart rates, and everyone listening, find out your max heart rate to know, are you actually running zone two, or are you just guessing?
Yeah, I ripped that workout that Andrew suggested. I think it was the multiple repeats of 3 minutes. I didn't do 3 minutes. I did 5 by 1K, and by the fourth one I couldn't do it. But geez, I found my max heart rate, 196, baby.
Frig, so it worked? I don't know if I could get that high. Let me tell you. When I see 180s, I just stop.
Okay, well let's say this. I give you permission, despite my hot take, I give you permission to go out and rip a high intensity interval session. Now we're talking a lot about running, but the cyclists listening, and I know the cyclists that I ride with, are just as guilty of pushing it too hard on what's supposed to be a nice easy ride or a zone 2 ride, because time and time again we have one or two mans who are just ripping down sections when we're supposed to be recovering. And what does the pack do? They start chasing, and then after a while everybody is at like plus 165 heart rates out of zone 2, just completely blowing up. Doesn't matter the ride, it's happening.
I've been on a few of those rides, and I can confirm there's a couple menaces in that group.
Confirm, those are the best rides, though, you have to admit.
Oh yeah, it's fun competing out there, but yeah, it certainly takes away from the focused training that we talk so highly about.
Speaking of training, let's go around the room and see how all of our training for our fall events is going. Ty, how about you? You first. Your Ironman Maryland's coming up in a couple weeks time. How's
Frig,
it going? How you feeling?
19 days from today, and right now we are peaking. I just hit a double peak week, and man, I don't know, we're feeling pretty good. I'm kind of confused how good I feel, but that's a good sign. Like I'm staying recovered, staying injury free. Knock on wood. We're not gonna do anything 8 days out. That's gonna do anything bad for the legs. But I don't know. I've just hit back to back weeks at over 13 hours a week, so it's been hitting all the workouts, all the speed and zone 2 work, and it's been feeling good. Now I'm kind of sad that we're in taper phase now. We're starting tapering this week, so should be good. It's going really good. How about you guys?
I guess I can go next. So, Waterfront Marathon, October 20th. So we have about a month and a half left. Definitely not where I want to be, but had a planned week off with the big move. I was missing last week and then was away canoeing this past weekend. Picking back up this week, jumping right into a double peak week, actually. So, pretty excited for that, see how the legs feel, and hopefully I can muster up some fitness because I'm definitely a little bit behind right now.
I'm telling you, the double peak
Very
week
nice.
is a must.
Yeah, it's nice. You're really recovered going into your heaviest mileage. It's an interesting tactic, but I know it must have been exhausting moving and having to take some time off the legs, but hopefully you can pull it together and get back on track with the plan.
Oh yeah, you
And
can't throw out
let's
the plan.
Let's hear about the opposite of zone 2 training that you got going on, Brian.
Yeah, my training plan has had a lot of high intensity stuff. I'm basically two high intensity workouts a week. This week, 53K, but I have a 5K tune up race. Now, I'm a little bit scared because I don't want to break 20, but I'm going to try to PR the 5K. So hopefully I can be at about 2030, 2040, and that'll be edging around the PR in my 5K so that I can, drop about 10 seconds per K in 1 month for the BIM 5K on October 5th. That's a Saturday at the Allenberg Bridge. You're all invited if you're listening. There's a form on our website, boysinmotion.com, where you can sign up and join me, Tyler, and Andrew running the BIM 5K with a lot of other boys and some gals coming out to run it as well.
It's gonna be a blast. Where are you doing your 5K TT?
I was thinking of actually going down to the course. It's on a Friday, so if Friday afternoon is nice, I might actually go down to the Allenberg Bridge and run it on that course, kind of get a feel for exactly how it'll be on race day because I have the opportunity to do so just being so close. But yeah, about a month out from the BIM 5K, so I'm excited. And for the cycling, I'm just sprinkling in kind of on rest days, cross training days, some cycling here and there. Nothing too serious, nothing structured, but I'm excited for the tune up Tuesdays to start hitting the late fall and winter calendar.
I was gonna say I'm getting a one up on you guys on the My Whoosh. I got a few hours on there already. Oh, I can't wait for the Tune Up Tuesdays. It's gonna be nice.
All right, folks, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Boys in Motion podcast. We talked everything Zone 2. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and join our Strava club. You can find all the links at boysinmotion.com. Also, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you never miss an episode.
And just a weekly reminder that we are absolutely not medical professionals, and the advice and tips that we share are based on our experience and research. And always consult with a healthcare provider before making significant changes to your exercise routine. And if Tyler tells you to do some crazy things, maybe consult other people too for that.
Yeah, like Andrew and I.
Come on. All I could say is choo choo. Keep chugging along in Zone 2, and we'll see you guys next time on the Boys in Motion.